And just building on what we've been talking about, there was a World Economic Forum, a report that was released that said that current trends could lead to over 5 million jobs in the white collar jobs being lost between 2015 and 2020, which could be a lot of us. And there could be a gain of over 2 million jobs in the fields of math, engineering, technology, and architecture. So clearly, skills gap is already impacting people. It's impacting organizations. Jeanne, talk a little bit more about how technology and artificial intelligence is going to impact white-collar jobs today and in the near future.
Yeah, well, and I'll start with probably the point we made just a little while ago, which is in the digital world, the new currency is data and information and insight. And so that's the currency. That's what everybody's banking on. That's what most information services organizations rely on to make really good decisions. And so the people that can do the best job of connecting the dots with the data, not necessarily crunch the data. Crunching the data is in fact an artificial intelligence world. So what's happening is it's just like every white skilled labor what's happening with white skilled labor, same thing that happened with a white collar labor is the same thing that happened with farming and everything else in the past, which is certain jobs become routine. And in those routine jobs, it's pretty easy to use technology, analytics, robotics, even surgery. I mean, look at the medical profession, right? 50% of all surgeries these days are happening robotically. And there's a good thing about that. The good thing is that robots are a lot more accurate than a surgeon's hand. Now, there's a surgeon behind every single one of them, but that surgeon is guiding through technology where that hand's going and making sure that they can make just a tiny little insert in your knee versus opening up the whole thing, right? These are good things. And it's not just about, people like to try to predict job loss. The reality is we don't know. There's no one that actually knows. I've been through all the data, all the research. Nobody knows how much actual job loss we. I actually focus more on the new jobs that are being created, because we know in technology it's more than 2 million. There's 1 million jobs being created today in cybersecurity that aren't filled. So the new jobs I predict will be more in the 10 million of what's going to happen with technology as things start to radically shift. And what you'll see most companies doing is doing the same things that every single industrial revolution has happened before now, which is find ways to use technology to do those mundane, those routine kind of things, and then get people that can actually transcend that and bring that information together in new and different ways and solve new problems. So I think the world of the white collar worker will be that of using these machines as another brain, as a fast brain that can help them solve problems more quickly, and in automating some basic things that now are, quite frankly, very bureaucratic, very difficult to manage, either in the banking industries or the healthcare industries or, in city management, for example. And, there will be quite a shift, I think, in the thing that people talk about a lot is drivers, like driverless cars. That's probably a good example of what everyone could possibly see, right? In the world of driverless cars, do you need drivers? Or will it be like airplane pilots who actually sit there, don't actually drive, sit there and make sure that the car is still running and that if anything happens, they can intermediate and stop the car from doing something that could be dangerous. So people think about, blue collar, white collar, all the different types of new jobs that are going to be created aren't even invented yet. I would say that in the last year alone, about 60 new jobs popped on the market. New jobs, new categories, new kinds of things that are going on. Old analyst jobs, for example, the traditional analyst job is now being elevated to data scientist. Right? So that's an evolution of an existing role that you can actually reskill people to. when companies use cognitive and artificial intelligence, what they're really trying to do is process stuff on the back end really, really fast, because the human brain cannot do it. If you look at how it's being used today, we use it actually in some of our support services, and I've seen, I have company clients that are using it in the medical profession to do better job processing through x-rays and labs, so that they can actually bring data there faster, so they can actually solve the patient problem faster. But of course, it's not the robot or the engine behind that's having that conversation with the patient, or even determining what that means. They're just processing data and doing it really, really fast, right? So artificial intelligence is not in a place or time where it actually can make decisions for you yet. You have to design it to, first of all, know everything that it knows. You have to design it so it can learn. You have to design it so that it can, if you want it to make decisions, you have to tell it what decisions and under what conditions you want the decisions to be made. So human beings are actually hugely part of the design of all of this automation. That has to happen. There's no way that that machine can do it on its own. So when people, I know there's lots of great movies out there that do a great job of depicting a world without humans, and machines take over the world, but the reality is we're nowhere near that in the ability of machines to take that kind of role. They simply can't make decisions on their own. They simply can't learn anything on their own without being fed. So we're going to all be in the mode of, if you think about it in the future, of actually skilling up and retraining these machines and teaching these machines things so they can actually process the information faster for us to get things done. And yes, they will automate low-level tasks, but those are tasks that nobody in this room wants to do anyways. So I honestly think that the world of technology will open up more interesting, exciting opportunities, more of the type of jobs that we all want to do and we all aspire to do. We just have to be willing to change and continue to learn and continue to move forward and think about how do we use robots and automation and all these things to do the right things that we want it to do. We are in control of our destiny here. We get to decide what they get to do and what they don't get to do and how fast this thing goes. And I think that's really important. In Cisco services, I'll give you a case study example how we are using it. We have millions of customers around the globe. Every customer in this room is probably a Cisco customer, and everywhere I go, there are Cisco customers. And our technology is very, very complicated. Networking is still a very complicated science. And when people build networks, they're combining a lot of things together that are customized. They're actually always, every day, customizing their build of a network to make it meet their needs. And as a result of that, it's complex. There's no two networks that are exactly alike. And so what we're doing is we're using AI and machine learning to actually start grabbing every case that comes into the system when a customer calls us with a problem. It's grabbing every piece of data, it's learning the data, and we're feeding it answers every day. And then at some point, what that's going to be able to do is allow us to be fed faster, allow every one of our customer care people, when they pick up that phone and the customer's got a serious problem in that network and they need answers fast, instead of taking 15, 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours to solve that problem, they will have that problem solved within a second. And so that's the beauty of using technology and machine learning, is that it can process it a lot faster. You can take all the data you feed into it, process it much faster, and give you an output that will allow you to actually drive a better result for your customers. So the way we're thinking about it is not interfacing directly with our customers, but being behind all of the people that need to serve our customers at a very high level of intelligence.
It's interesting. The World Economic Forum also predicted something like 65% of children entering primary school today are going to be doing jobs that don't exist today.
That's right.
It seems like it could be maybe even higher based on everything that. Tom, given so many of these changes that are going on, what are going to be some of the long-term priorities for learning leaders in terms of collaboration with human resources and other parts of the organization to ensure that the skills gap is constantly being addressed?
The intersection and the interdependency that exists as a result of everything, Jeanne, that you just talked about is actually quite complex, and it's becoming more relevant and more important. So for a couple of examples that I was thinking about, one, while artificial intelligence is growing, a person still needs to know. The question is, what do they need to know, and what do they need to have access to? So how the corporation or business or whatever that entity strategy is around the way they capture, store, and create knowledge at an organizational level, at an enterprise level, becomes very critical to how you think about how you would start to address a skill gap. A very narrow, specific example is it's very easy today with technology and to go to an offshore data center and have that data center work through all the pricing of securities for a mutual fund that invests in a whole ton of things that needs to have some opinion written on it. A report comes back and says, yeah, we did the work, these are the prices. Right? The person on this end, though, still has to have some ability to discern whether or not that was done right. And so the idea of the atrophy that is accelerated as a result of the greater use of technology, the smarter technology becomes, presents a real risk and actually creates these skill gaps. So there is this intersect in an organization that basically says, how do you deal with your technology people? How do you deal across your human capital community? How do you deal with your business leaders to understand that you are preserving the ability of your people to perform, that you're building systems that create the right access to things that they need to learn. And maybe they do it in a way that's more snackable, right? Because it's more relevant, because I want the bite, and it helps me continue to grow in how I do it. And that becomes a very complex conversation around an organization because it touches on the nature of culture. It touches really around the nature of how the business model has to evolve. So unless you're thinking about the nature of the way we're going to do business and how we're going to use technology, there's a high risk that you're going to sub-optimize your ability to address that problem. The gap that will exist will remain too great because the risk will remain high. So it's not necessarily an easy question other than from that perspective, because it says from a talent development standpoint, you have to have a greater appreciation of the business model, the way the enterprise works, how connections flow, and how enterprise technology is going to influence the nature of the way people actually work, the way they learn, and the way they engage.
Danielle, have you found that a skills gap ever hindered any organization that you worked with from, a project being deployed, from work getting done? Tell us about your experience with that.
Yeah, the short answer is yes, absolutely. I think the question for me when I go, so a lot of my work revolves around going into different organizations of all types, some corporate, for-profit, startup, nonprofit, government. So I see lots of different patterns and that are interestingly similar across all different types of organizations. And I would say when I see gaps, it's sort of one of two types, right? One is this sort of like technical skill gap. And I'm using the word technical loosely here, right? Whatever the skills are that you need to actually function in your role, do you have those? And I think that one is actually easier to solve. The second one I see is around leadership qualities in general, I'm going to say, and I don't mean necessarily for people who just supervise people. I mean personal leadership qualities, right? Like being able to take initiative, being able to influence people, sort of knowing your own identity and how you can leverage that most impactfully in different situations. And that one is a lot harder to do. I think we're going to talk about this a little bit more when we move into sort of the why section, But I also think, luckily, the second one is one that we can constantly be trained. Like, that's always going to be an issue. There's nothing that's going to change about either like technology or shifting demographics that are going to make those skills less relevant. So I actually think, even though it's a harder thing to train people on, like, right, very easy to read a book on leadership, and have knowledge of. We were sort of talking about this at my table this morning, but quite different to have that know-how. But it is something that we can always sort of build into our repertoire of strategies and training programs that we're using across different organizations, and it's always going to be relevant for people across any job I can imagine. You need to have those personal leadership qualities. Those are the two big. You want to jump?
I was going to ask you on that. One of the things we see certainly is that collaboration is one of those core leadership capabilities now, particularly in the world of technology, that is so highlighted,
Yes.
right? Do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so interesting. So this is funny. So Vishali mentioned that there's the World Economic Forum report that came out, like with the skills gap. A lot of this stuff we're talking about today. If you haven't read that, I highly recommend it. It's really useful. They actually released another report. I think it was also this year on education, right? Where the gaps are in education. It's the exact same things that we're seeing, right? Educators are starting to realize, we're pushing all these sort of functional skills, right?
all about
Literacy,
the
numeracy,
integration.
those are great. But actually, we need to be teaching collaboration and emotional intelligence. And we were saying again this morning at my table, those seem like warm, fluffy things, right? Like, of course, we should have ethical leaders and emotionally intelligent leaders. But in fact, we have data now that's showing that those things actually affect real business outcomes. So more than just being a nice to have, there are things that if
You actually can't work in the digital world without a collaborative team.
Exactly.
It's just a fact.
Yeah,
It's just a fact.
Huge dysfunctions
Yeah.
arise when people come in without that skill set. And this gets to Tom's earlier point. Sometimes I think we assume that people will come, even out of higher education and have that skill set, and
Yeah.
that's not necessarily the case. And I think educators are realizing that, and then also employers. So I think we really need to sort of like tackle it from both angles if we want to make sure that people have the 21st century and beyond skills that they need to be successful. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and I would just add, and I like with the way you characterize it, is that there's always going to be the ability to address the technical side. There's a solution for that.
Yeah.
1 + 1 = 2. You can get to that. The softer side, which is becoming more and more critical today on balance, is this whole notion of, I would agree, appropriately characterize it as personal leadership or self-leadership.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
The ability to lead yourself and understanding what's involved with that from the perspective of listening, empathy,
Yes.
being authentic. It adds into it within organizations the significance and importance of code of conduct, ethics, right? And how you do
Yeah,
business and how you
absolutely.
engage. Because all of those things are becoming
Yes.
greater. And with the nature of social media
Yeah.
and the influence of social media on an organization, it's amazing, some of the things. So the question, that comes up, right? The old way of school is everybody used to sit down, take a test, sit in the room.
Oh.
It was proctored, right? Everybody took it at the same time, you got your grade, right? Well, if you do that test and you do that across an organization, how do you deal with the fact that social media is out there and someone says, boy, did you look at question number 3? Right? What would you get as an answer to question number 3? It's now going out on a Facebook Friends network of 800 people or some other social media people. So is it ethical or unethical that the person on the other side who hasn't taken the test yet may have gotten the answer to number 3? How do you deal with that in your organization? So
Yeah, the ethics of
fluence that.
technology in general,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
just, yes,
Yeah.
and artificial intelligence,
That's
how do you
right.
program them, what types
How
of
all of
decisions to
them.
make in
Right.
certain contexts. Yeah, I think these are really good questions.
Increases the dynamic around how complex
Yeah.
the nature of how you address skill gap has become.
The other thing I see too, especially I think because we work with, you're in Cisco and I work with a lot of tech companies, I think we see people who want to bring in, right, the brightest technologists
Yeah.
they can find. But in some ways it's easy to train people on that, right? Like if someone doesn't know Ruby on Rails, you can actually just give them a book on it or they can look at a website and learn to do it quickly. And I think these other personal leadership skills are a lot harder because they're things where you get that initial knowledge of, but then there's research that shows the brain, you actually change behavior. The brain changes its sort of thought patterns through opportunities to practice and then get
That's right.
targeted feedback. It's a process that I hope for me at least, occurs over the course of my entire life. It's not just like, okay, I've nailed emotional intelligence now, right? I think we all know we get better at that over time, but how do we think about then how to design programs in our organization so that people develop those skills initially and then have opportunities, again, for that practice and targeted feedback, and that's a lot harder and it's resource intensive.
Sure.
One of the things that we like to think about at Cisco is, really hiring for the culture and for the values. And then, and yes, we do ask them to have some amount of capabilities underneath that, but we are very, very willing to train them and skill them up on all of the technology pieces because that's so easy for us to do. It really is. It's the easiest part of the job. And the most important thing is that you bring people in that are okay and comfortable working outside of their silos.
Yeah.
People that feel comfortable with personal growth, with being challenged, with
Yeah, to your point earlier about, like, I'm putting myself in challenging situations
Yeah.
every day. We have to make people feel comfortable. And I think in some cases, there's this whole sort of movement around helicopter parenting right now. But in some ways, we've, like,
Overmanaged.
yeah,
Overmanaged.
we've, like, disempowered people because
Yeah.
we've done so much for them. And then
Yeah.
they're uncomfortable taking risks. And risk-taking and good decision-making around risk is a huge leadership quality that we want people, again, not just like your top 3%, we want everyone in the organization to have those skills. It's
Absolutely,
great.
absolutely. And add to it ambiguity.
That's
Yes.
right.
The dynamic.
Flexibility, yeah, adaptability.
Where you know today you're going to face something very different.
Lots of gray matter in the future.
Absolutely.
Lots of gray matter, and they have to be able to deal with it.